Hey, welcome back. While it may be very cold to many in the Northern Hemisphere, I bet you can still feel the earth awakening beneath you. And I reckon that you also have that yearning for spring, especially since the light is lingering a little longer. Well, you're not alone. And true to form, I wanted to share some witchy ways to celebrate Imbolc or Imbolg that you can incorporate into your everyday witchcraft practice, starting with some grapefruit and rosemary shortbread cookies. These are amazing for Imbolg or Imbolc because they use a lot of butter, and grapefruit and rosemary are both in season towards February. Start making the infused sugar by zesting one whole grapefruit. And then with the zest, you're going to rub the zest and the sugar together. This is going to do some really wonderful things. Not only is it going to be very flavorful and fragrant, but you can also use this to sweeten any of your magical workings. And then I'm drawing a sigil or symbol into the sugar. The next thing is to add the rosemary. Now, I have some growing outside, but of course you can buy some, or you can use dried rosemary if you don't have fresh. But of course, fresh is going to make it even more fragrant because it's going to be releasing the oils as you rub it together. And remember, when you're rubbing this sugar together, when you're rubbing all of your ingredients, you're putting your thought, your energy, your intention into this magical working. So even every single step to making these shortbread cookies, each individual step or ingredient can become its own magical working. Butter is not only great for abundance, but it is sacred to this time of year. It is often said that the name Imbolc or Imbolg means ewe's milk or in the belly, which symbolizes the first stirrings of spring, fertility, and new life. It is marking the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And this is also when we have the snow moon. I'm not only using the bright, citrusy, airy, fragrant flavors of the grapefruit and the rosemary, but when we do the sprinkling of sugar on top, I'm going to add a little bit of water, and that's going to create a little bit of a crust, and it's going to be like that crunchy, crispy snowfall, like that last snowfall where things are beginning to melt away. Now, I know you're going to want this recipe for the shortbread cookies, so head on over to Patreon. You can join the Coven free 7-day trial. Come and join us, check it out, see what we're all about, get your recipe, get a couple more resources so you can develop your witchcraft practice that flows with everyday life. And while this chills in the refrigerator, it's time to make a few more witchcrafts. Imbolc celebrates the Celtic goddess Bridget, a powerful deity of fire, poetry, smithcraft, and healing. She often symbolizes creative fire, purification, and new life. She is tied to the Christian Saint Bridget, whose sacred flame was tended for centuries. Because of this, it is common to bless or make candles around this time of year. Now, I'm sure you've heard of people painting candles, and this was actually my first attempt at doing it. So first thing you want to do is wipe it clean with some rubbing alcohol or vinegar. And now again, this is part of your magic. Remember, you are cleansing all of the energy, not just the debris, but the energy off of these candles. And then the colors and the patterns that you choose to paint on your candles matter. I chose flowers because of the blossoming, the blooming of spring and new life and new beginnings. And I chose blue because it is associated with healing. I found that little dotted designs tend to work better. Use any type of candle, they could be paraffin or beeswax, but acrylic paint is definitely a must. You can find daughter tools to create dotted designs like this at nail supply stores or craft stores. Or if you don't feel like finding one or fishing yours out of the garage like me, you can also just use the end of a paintbrush. You could use a pen. You could use a pencil that's a little bit dull, something that has a slightly rounded but pointy end, and just keep on dotting. I started with the blue flower petals, let that dry, and then came back and did a little yellow dot in the middle. I always set up an altar for every turn of the wheel. However, this time, because I'm going to be using live bulbs that I want to grow, I'm going to be putting it in a very sunny window. My usual altar space is a little bit dark. Now, if you've been around here for a while, you know that I do this every Imbolg. I will start some bulbs indoors. They're called forced bulbs, and I have a spell that I do with them, a ritual, and I'll actually post that in the Patreon coven, so you can go grab it there too. But what I love to do is if you start it this time of year, if you start it for Imbolg, you usually will have blooms around Ostara, so it works out beautifully. You can use any container for this, but a shallow one works best. And if you're a beginner, definitely a clear one is going to be a little bit easier. So for the white container, I just used some regular gravel from my yard, and then I went back and added some more crystals around it. Because you don't actually want the roots and the bulbs in water. You actually want to put just enough water so that it sits underneath the root or just barely touches the bottom of the root, because you actually want the roots to grow towards the water. And to me, that it is a beautiful symbolism of how we must root down into the ground. We must be grounded before we can actually grow up towards the sky. With our forced bulbs, I'm also including a rose of Jericho, which is known as the resurrection plant. This is a cool little plant. They come in all different sizes. I have a tiny one here. This one's really cool because if there is more moisture in the air, it will begin to open up, and as it dries up, it will close, but it always resurrects. It always comes back. So I like to set it up to where it is, again, a little bit raised above the water. You'll notice if you have some that there are roots on the other side. And so I put the water down so that the roots can grow towards the water. And I'm in a very dry climate, so it is good for me to mist the Rose of Jericho every couple days and keep it in a sunny area, not a dark area, because it can mold if it gets a little too wet. So misting it and keeping the water more towards the roots instead of pouring water directly on it seems to have better results. If you want more everyday witchcraft and magic, go and grab the Naturally Modern Witch calendar. It is a free calendar. I send it out every month right to your inbox. It gives you one magical spell or witchy thing that you can do every day to connect you to your craft. And here is what it looks like after a couple hours of moisture, getting some of the water on its roots and getting a little bit of water on top. It can start to open up quite wide sometimes. And if you have little pieces that break off or fall off, have no fear. Those are perfect for little spell bags, little spell bottles, spell jars. Every once in a while, you're going to want to change this water, and this water holds magical properties of resurrection. So use it accordingly. Now that our cookies have chilled for at least 4 hours, we want to use a very, very sharp knife to slice them and place them on a lined baking sheet. And I brush them with just a tiny little bit of water and sprinkle a little bit of our infused sugar on top. So not only is it delicious, not only does it sweeten our magic, but it's also going to represent snow. Each month in the Patreon Coven, we have monthly witchy challenges. We have a Green Witch Challenge, a Kitchen Witch Challenge, and a House Witch Challenge. So for our Green Witch Challenge in February, we are focusing on the plant birch. So here I am making some birch infused oil. Birch is amazing to work with in your magical practice. It is especially wonderful to work with around this time of year because of its magical properties, which include new beginnings, purification, protection, and fertility. To make birch oil, simply add dried birch, bark or buds to a jar and fill it with oil, making sure you cover all of the plant matter. Then shake in your intention, bless it, and imbue it with your energy. And I like to add a crystal. And since the altar is right next to the window, a little offering of milk and honey for the window spirits. I'll be making ice lanterns or ice luminaries. These are very popular for Yule or winter solstice, but I like to make them this time of year because I add little seeds to the bottom, allowing them to melt outside and planting our intention into the ground, into the soil, along with nature's rhythm. So you'll need 2 containers, one that fits comfortably inside the other. You want to leave a little space around. And you're going to first add about an inch, maybe half an inch, maybe a little less of water to the bottom and add some seeds. I used chia seeds. They grow really well in my area and they have beautiful purple flowers when they do bloom. And then to that, I added some herbs that are in season. So I added rosemary and thyme. Thyme is also the herb that we are working with in the Patreon Coven for our Kitchen Witch Challenge. Now, after you've added all of your herbs, I like to try to keep them to where they're going to be under the water so that they don't turn colors in the freezer. But put this in the freezer for a couple hours. Now, once it is frozen, you'll take it out, put a few rocks in that middle container, and then place the middle container, continue adding more herbs, and then you're going to add a little bit more water. And the next morning, after letting it sit for about 10 minutes, I could pull the center container out, and you can now see that little space where we're going to have the light. But after about another 10 minutes, it slid right out of that larger container, and we have a beautiful candle holder or lantern or luminary. And what's beautiful about it is that it's going to bring all of this magical energy and help plant our intentions. All right, back into the freezer until the night of Imbolg. During our ritual, I'm going to let the candles burn. And after the ritual, I will extinguish the candles and let the ice melt naturally, planting our intentions. I hope you have a wonderful Imbolg and you're enjoying spring to come. Blessed be.